So my topic is about disaster prevention simplified with accessibility. Okay, thanks, Jonathan, for that thumbs up. And then just a brief introduction about myself. I am a UN delegate for the Zero Project Conference in Vienna. I have been trained by the UN since 2014 regarding accessibility and disaster prevention. So I have been reporting with the UN since 2016 for the Philippine Action Plan. Also, I have a certificate for safety in the basic security in the field. So I was also trained to survive terrorist attacks, just in case. Hope that does not happen here in the Philippines. And if you are actually curious about training more for disaster prevention management, you can go to the Asian Institute of Management. They offer actually a graduate and diploma studies for disaster prevention and management. AIM is actually a branch of Harvard here in Asia. And then also with the emergency architects, they also consult us regarding the design and evacuation of people during said disasters. And hopefully that doesn't, come into effect. But we are a disaster-prone country. Philippines is always struck by earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and typhoons. So hoping we could be all prepared for the worst. Also, we do consultancies with other government agencies. For this one, the NAIA consulted us regarding the disaster mitigation, and in case something happens with probably attacks or typhoon-related disasters. So, what are the minimum requirements for buildings? So, let's define the building user. A building user is a person, regardless of age, size, ability, or disability, using the facilities in a building or associated external environment. So when you say the built environment, it is a composite term that comprises buildings, streets, and transportation, and a transfer at interfaces between these where many user difficulties often occur and where design attention is often necessary. So why are we talking about this? What happens is we are following the accessibility law here in the Philippines. The accessibility law in the Philippines was established in 1983, and it is actually the oldest here in Asia. So most of the countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, they perfected their accessibility laws back only in the 90s. But for us, we created the accessibility law back in 1983. So that is a feat for the Philippines. So all buildings should have these features as well. So for instance, we have the ramp, which is a 1:12 gradient. So when you say 1:12, the 1 is this axis and the 12 is this one. It doesn't say inches or meters. It's actually a unit. So you can always go for the ratio and proportion of the said gradient. Okay? So don't forget, 1:12. And then it should be located at or near the main entrance. And with 2 handrails, both sides with the height of 0.7 and 0.9 meters. It should have a maximum length of 6 meters. And beyond that, you should have a landing of 1.5 by 1.5. Also, you should have the width of the ramp by 1.2 with clearance on both sides. So the relevance of the ramp is for the persons with disability users, but that is not the case here for disasters. What happens is, if you have a disaster at hand, you need the ramp basically to transport people out of your building. So if you don't have the ramp, a lot of bad things can happen during said disaster. Also, during the release of your building permit, all these features that I will be discussing should be there, because if not, your building permit is actually illegal, because there's a part in the said building permit that states that all these features must be inside your building. Okay, it is a requirement of the law. So if you do not have these features, you're actually constructing an illegal building. Okay, next onto the washrooms or the toilets. The minimum requirement right now in the Philippines is 1.7 by 1.8 meters, with the width of the door at 0.8 minimum. Then you should have a 1.5 by 1.5 turning space inside, clear, and you should have one movable grab bar and one fixed grab bar. But for the new universal design standards, it is being suggested that we should enlarge this space to a minimum of 1.8 by 2.5, because the current size, which is 1.7 by 1.8, cannot actually fit the 1.5 by 1.5 turning radius of the wheelchair. So that's what's being suggested, that should be bigger. If you're looking at the picture at the right, the installation of the movable grab bar is actually wrong. It should be going vertically instead of horizontally. Okay, so we're showing this picture because it is of a wrong installation. Okay, also another of the minimum requirements for the construction of buildings is the parking area. This should be located nearest to the entrance. It should not be far away. And some designs, they tend to hide the parking area, especially for parking for PW users, but that should not be the case. And then it should have the signage at the pavement and should have a slot width of 3.7 minimum. The regular slot is usually 2.5, right? 2.5 by 5. But for the PW users, you should have a bigger width because if you're using wheelchair, you need an ample space of an addition of 1.2 meters in width. Okay. And then we have the signages. So the signages, as a minimum requirement, should always be one at the ramps and number two at the comfort rooms. So it should be very visible, and you should have the color of the United Nations blue. If you're wondering what that color is, you can always type at the internet United Nations blue, and you would see the exact color for that and the ample size and width of the signages. And then also non-skid flooring. This is actually controversial because any kind of flooring, if it's wet, is, it could be quite slippery. But United Nations suggests that if you're using a cane and if you point it at 45 degrees and it doesn't slip, then it's a non-skid flooring. Okay, and non-skid flooring should be always located at the comfort rooms, at the ramp flooring with the grooves, and then with corrugated floor for the blind. Okay. If you see the tactile type of floorings, that is for people who are blind, so that they could be guided inside the buildings. Okay. So another minimum requirement is for the doors and entrances, the vestibules. The vestibules outside should be at a minimum of 1.8 by 1.5. This is for senior citizens and wheelchair users to rest, because climbing the stairs or climbing the ramp would be kind of difficult for some people, and they need a rest area when they reach the front of your building. And then you have the door width, again, a minimum of 0.8, because commercially wheelchair users, they have this average width of 0.7 width for their wheelchairs. And then we have the doorknob height between 0.82 and 1.06 meters, so that this could be reachable by children and senior citizens and persons with disabilities. And then the door should be operable by the force of 4 kilograms. So what is 4 kilograms? So imagine if you're using your shoulders and you're carrying something and you need to open the door. So if you use your shoulders and you push the door and it opens, that is the force of 4 kilograms. If you cannot open the door using your shoulders, then that is not, the minimum requirement for the operable door. Okay. So to impress reference, describes them what is the force of 4 kilograms. Okay, so next we have the stairs. The stairs should be slip-resistant material and should have slanted nosings. So slanted nosings look like this. So usually if you have a cane, if you're a senior citizen, you might trip if there is a, protrusion with the stairs. So the law requires that all stairs should have slanted nosings. And then for the corridors, the width should be 1.2 minimum with a turnabout spaces of 1.5 by 1.5, as we described a while ago. This is the turning radius for the wheelchair, the ordinary wheelchair. And then the turnabout spaces every 3.5 meters or at the very dead end of the corridor. Okay, you cannot imagine someone turning around a wheelchair and there is only 1.2 width space there. The requirement should be 1.5 by 1.5. Okay, thumbs up, please, if you can hear me. Thumbs up, please, if you can hear me. Thank you. And next we have sensitivity and integration. Okay, so what is universal design? So when you say universal design, you're thinking like this is designed for everyone, right? But this is a misnomer. Universal design does not exist anymore. It's because back in the 90s, what happened was, oops. Hope you can see me. Thumbs up, please, if you can see me. There was a glitch. Oops. Okay, and I'm back. So what happened back in the 90s was a universal design was created to cater to everyone. But they saw the problem, like if you're designing for a chair, what happened was if you are an Asian and you're sitting in a chair which is designed for European users, your feet would be dangling. So when you say universal design now, it's more of regional design. So Asians could design for Asians and Europeans could design for Europeans. Okay. So the purpose of universal design is to provide independent living. Fundamental to the concept of universal design is the principle of independent living, allowing any individual to live and carry out as many everyday tasks as possible without relying on other people. This is especially important to people as they become older and may need a more supportive environment. If their existing home is not suitable, they may have to move to another more suitable place or else have to become reliant on a helper. Current attitudes show that such a move would be unnecessary where dwellings are designed to standards that allow aging in place with minimal adaptation. So we should allow people to live independently so that they would not be reliant on other people. Okay. So when you say inclusive design, so although a building or its approaches may be accessible and barrier-free, its design and planning might mean that a person in a wheelchair, for instance, may have to use a separate entrance from the one used by other people. This discriminates against people with disability and therefore is not inclusive. Inclusive design is possibly a more modern and human consideration than universal design and effectively supersedes it. Roger Coleman of the Helen Hamlin Institute in London described inclusive design not a new genre of design nor a separate specialism, but an approach to design in general and an element of business strategy that seeks to ensure that mainstream products, services, and environments are accessible to the largest number of people. To explain universal design, you see me holding this cup, this mug actually. And what happens is, just by looking at the mug, you know how to drink from it, okay? There's water inside, so you drink it like this. You don't drink it, upside down, and you have this comfortable holder in place so that you can just, hold this here in case this is hot. That is universal design. Universal design is almost everywhere nowadays. It's not like we are drinking from horns during the era of the Vikings, right? This is a mug, and this is very comfortable to use. Just by looking at it, you know how to handle it, and that is the principle of universal design. So universal design should be everywhere. Okay. So when you're looking at the ramp, it's part of universal design because, as you can see, if a disaster happens, you need to bring people out, and that is the easiest way of bringing people around, especially if they're in a wheelchair or if they're being carried over instead of getting down via stairs. So what is disaster prevention? So disaster prevention are measures taken to eliminate the root causes that make people vulnerable to disaster. So for instance, what happened here is we were vacationing in one of those rest houses in Rizal, and it suddenly took a turn wherein it got very dark and started raining very hard. And suddenly there was this lightning, and it struck that tree over there. So the tree was half burnt. And what was scary is that the fire from the tree could have transferred to that house. And we should have disaster mitigation procedures in case some things like that happen to our buildings. So what entails disaster prevention? So when you say disaster prevention, it's actually preparedness, just in case. So when we say disaster risk management, we have three areas. We have preparedness. So these are the measures taken before an event. And then we have mitigation, which are measures taken before and after an event. So for response, these are the measures taken during and mostly after an event. Okay, so design assessment for safety of your buildings. Usually we have things to consider like geography. So your geography could greatly affect what might happen to your building, and then the history of the site. If sometimes you don't really know the history of the site, and look what happened with Mount Pinatubo in Pampanga. Most of actually the world was caught unaware that there is actually a volcano there, and if you remember what happened, we had years of tragedy regarding that. And then we have the soil tests. Well, with the soil tests, of course, we would determine the structural design of the building. Thumbs up, please, if you can hear me. Thumbs up, please. Thumbs up, please. Thank you. Okay, so for the construction assessment, so in case your building is already erected, we can consider physical appearance. So even if your building is still in construction, you can see that there might be damage, and you have to investigate that further. And then, of course, we have the consideration of the design of the architectural and engineering plans, which are submitted to the local government units and approved by the building official. And then we have the construction methods. So in construction methods, we should be able to determine the best course for the erection of the building. So usually, one of the scare factors in disaster is liquefaction. So for liquefaction, it is when the soil behaves like ketchup. So you can imagine pouring ketchup on a plate and putting something on the surface, and that is how your building would behave during liquefaction. So we have a case here at the University of the Philippines, wherein one of the buildings, the National College for Public Administration and Governance, is actually slowly sliding. So the case here is that the UP campus is actually located in one of the minor plates, and there is a liquefaction at that area at the NCPAG building. So one of the minor fault lines is actually cutting all the way from the Marikina area to the Sunken Garden uh, onto the end of the Quezon building, which is actually being fronted by the ablation sculpture. So when an earthquake impacts, of course, you need to be ready for disaster preparedness kit. Usually, I've seen some drills here in the Philippines, and what happens is people are not aware of the disaster preparedness kit. So we shall be discussing this further on later. So when an earthquake impacts, you should seek protection, of course. So we should be doing the drop, cover, and hold. And then we shall also be discussing the triangle of life. Some people do not accept this because this is some theorists think this is perhaps by chance. And then we have to identify the safe zones in our areas. Okay, structural assessment. So this is one of our cases, and this is a orthopedic hospital. This is actually a compound, and this is one of their buildings. This is one of their old buildings, and they reported that the building is constantly moving. So just to verify, we went to the site, and if you understand the basic of earthquakes, all buildings should be moving constantly. You just do not feel it that much, but usually if you are in your house and usually you hear creakings at around 2 or 3 in the morning, that is actually your building or your house breathing. So it is actually constantly moving. So what happens during earthquakes is that the reverberation of the earthquake and the reverberation of the building equate itself to each other. And that's when your building does not move. And that is when your building falls down. All right. So for instance, with the walls of this building inside the orthopedic hospital compound, we saw some cracks. And what happens here is, are these cracks safe? Okay. So if you guys are looking at it and you're concluding that these may be just plaster related, then you are correct. Going further on, you can see that the cracks do not actually hit the beam at the picture on the left, and the cracks at the picture on the right actually just traverse parallel to the beam. So if the cracks are not actually hitting the structural components, then they are still safe. So this one is actually hitting part of the beam. So you have to investigate if the cracks are superficial and they might just be plaster related. Okay. Usually a crude technique that we employ is if you're using a coin, usually a 1 peso coin or 5 peso coin. If the peso coin does not go inside fully, then usually it is not a structural damage. So for this one, this is actually a case of buckling. As you can see, there's a deformation with the column, and there are actually multiple cracks emanating from that area. So this needs further investigation. Okay. Same building with the sagging or deformation. They reported sagging at the second floor slab. So this building was actually used for physical therapy, and most of the patients here they lost a limb. So this one, there is actually an actual deformation at the slab, and you can see from the ceiling at the ground floor that you can see there's actually rusting, and this is actually a part of the structural elements of the slab. And if this one appears in your building, it could be very dangerous already. As you may see, they have multiple sagging at that slab, and it is already apparent that we needed to evacuate the patients, of course, safely. You do not need to alarm the patients and the therapists. It's not an immediate danger, so they were able to evacuate the building easily. Okay, so again, we had this case with the Commission on Human Rights building. This is also inside the UP compound, and people panicked that their building might be actually going down. So we were actually asked to investigate again. And this is actually a similar investigation of the Rosas High School, also in Quezon City. So we did not want the people to actually panic. What happened was there was a mass evacuation of the students there, and of course the teachers, and they thought that the building was going to collapse. So people got hurt running out of the compound. And when we went to investigate, what happened was there was only the settling of the area around the building. So they showed the same damage, but it's actually not damage. It's actually the settling of the physical area outside the building. So the building was actually safe. So this is a similar case with the Commission on Human Rights building. They thought that there was an imminent danger with their building, so they had to evacuate. But when we went there, what was happening was, there was the settling outside the building. So the building itself was very stable. As you can see, if some layman would see this, they would think that this is actually very dangerous, but it's not. So concluding, is this safe or dangerous? Well, it's actually very safe. Okay, another is the DSWD sensor in Alabang. They thought that the building was going to fall down on them. So again, an evacuation. And then we found out there are just superficial cracks related to the plaster. As you can see, the cracks there are not hitting the structural elements such as the beams and the columns. All right, another part. No structural cracks. Usually the structural cracks are diagonal. Okay. Okay, sample here. They thought that the movement of the building was destroying their windows, and this is actually not true. We think that some kid was actually trying to, stone the windows down, so not actually structural damage. Okay, other parts of the DSWD building. Okay. So the SOS, the flashlights and the whistles. So if you are a tourist and you went to Hong Kong Disneyland, they would give you a small kit for the PWDs, because if you actually register as a PWD, they would give you this, the guest assistance packet. And of course, it would include the following: the flashlight, the whistle, which is not shown here, and a notebook. So the flashlight is in case the power goes down during emergencies. The whistle is to contact people using SOS. And then the notebook in case you cannot speak and you need to communicate with others. So for the SOS, what happens is, if you have a whistle, the tendency of most people is to use the whistle constantly. It's like, you're using it like the longest time, and you hold on for dear breath, and people do not actually hear you. So what you should do in case you are stuck somewhere and you cannot get out, you use the whistle to contact people, of course. But what happens is you should control your breathing, because you might lose consciousness. So when you're saying SOS, that's how you should spell out your whistling as well. So when you say SOS, that is how you should whistle. Okay? Point in contention. Some people do not get rescued because they use the whistle constantly, and then they lose breath or they lose consciousness, and they're left behind. So just in case, for you people, for emergency, how you spell SOS is how you whistle as well. Okay. So is your building safe? So things to consider again is age. So usually here in the Philippines, we have this certificate saying that if the building is already 50 years old, we recommend to, have it brought down already, or you should have a structural assessment so that you could strengthen the building. And then the location, of course, as we discussed before, and then the cracks, and then the deformations. So what to do during an earthquake? The problem with the people, during said times is that, we participate in drills, but what happens is everyone is panicking during said time. And first thing you should opt to do is don't panic. So for the drop, cover, and hold on technique, so just by looking at the picture, you know where to hide in case this happens. Usually people go underneath the tables. So that is how we are actually trained. So for the picture in the left, usually you should go underneath that table at the middle. But what if it's an open space and you don't know where to go, like the picture shown on the right? If you go at the middle, the overhead glass roofing might fall down on you, and it's open space, so you could actually trip on something in case things started falling from the roof or the ceiling. So usually, if this happens, you use the triangle of life technique. So the triangle of life is actually looking for an area where you can hide temporarily for during the said course of the earthquake or disaster, and you should use the fetal position beside that triangle of life. So for instance, for this area, shown at the picture on the left, you have this small space underneath that desk, but is that safe enough? Usually I'm a big person. I'm almost 6 in height, and I cannot hide within that area. So you should look for a triangle of life in that area. So what I would tend to do is I would go in a fetal position beside one of the photocopy machines. And that way, that 45-degree position where I'm in a fetal position would protect me from things falling during a disaster. So for an example on the picture on the right, if you are confused and you do not get underneath a desk, you should go in a fetal position beside the seats. Okay, that way, with the debris falling, there would be a 45-degree position that would protect you from all that debris going down during disasters. Okay. So for instance, if you're in a hotel room and you're looking for the triangle of life, the triangle of life is actually beside the bed. So as always, go in a fetal position and just go to that area beside the bed. Okay. There's a strange strategy for the PWDs. So they have a different safety guide. So for the PWDs, you should identify the hazards beforehand and secure the movable items, because movable items tend to fly, and you might get hurt just by those flying items during this disaster. Okay. Next, we need to create a disaster plan. So you create your personal support team. So usually for PWDs, especially the wheelchair users, they are not that mobile. So they need a partner in case something happens. So they should have a disaster plan with a said friend or relative to move them out of the building in case something happens. And then how to communicate in an emergency, as we discussed a while ago, you should have the whistle and use the SOS as a pattern for whistling. Okay, so organizing for disaster supplies. So we need to create a kit. So this is the standard kit found inside Hong Kong Disneyland. So they have food and water inside, just a minimum. And then you should put cash. Disneyland does not provide the cash there anymore, okay? And then we have the first aid medications. And then the copy of the prescriptions or identification in case you have a condition, in case you have, diabetes or a heart condition. You should have also the contact information there and communication supplies. As we mentioned, we have the flashlights. You can also use that for SOS. And then we have the whistles. And then we have the batteries, radio, set of clothes. Usually Disneyland would provide the raincoat inside, a very foldable raincoat. Could you imagine the raincoat would just be like this big of a pack, then you could bring it out. And then you have the gloves, and then you have the face mask. Even before the pandemic, they provided the face masks just in case. And then, lastly, whistle. So what if you can't? So if you cannot move immediately, if you cannot transfer, especially if you are a wheelchair user and you are resting on a bed, so you should cover your face and your chest as much as possible. So if you could do this position, then that will be the safest point that you can do in case something is happening. So, just to protect most of your body. If the PWD could roll down to the floor, he or she could also do the triangle of life, fetal position. Like for instance here. So for the safest spot, you could always go for fetal position near the desk, because you cannot actually hide underneath that. It's very small. Okay, so after an earthquake, so be prepared for aftershocks, of course. For instance, the one that happened in Davao, they recorded 400, imagine, 400 aftershocks after the initial earthquake. So stay close to and be aware of the safe places in your environment. The aftershocks are succeeding earthquakes after an initial one has occurred. So some aftershocks may be stronger than the initial earthquake. This has happened a bunch of times in the Philippines, and aftershocks are recorded to last up to 2 weeks. So liquefaction occurs when solid terrain behaves liquid-like, like we discussed a while ago, and usually liquefaction happens near bodies of water or land with high water content. Landslides may also ensue due to either aftershocks or liquefaction. So again, a reminder, don't panic. Tsunami. So in the 2014 report that we were privy to, due to the trash accumulation along Rojas Boulevard, tsunamis or tidal waves can now form along the boulevard area. So it is estimated that the tidal wave produced after an earthquake or its aftershock can reach up to Taft Avenue. Could you imagine that? All the way from Rojas Boulevard to Taft Avenue. That is a very big area. And if you remember, back in 2015, I think, Malati area was hit by, not actually a tsunami here in that area, but the storm surge. And they destroyed most of the areas near Malati Church. The Aristocrat restaurant was actually, all their windows were shattered. Even in SMOA, they had to shut down for a week because of the damages done. Even with the Spiral restaurant, which was newly renovated during that time, everything got wet and everything was unusable due to the storm surge. So we should be aware of such dangers in the area. A tsunami may be possible for coastal regions that experience shaking for more than 20 seconds. So in those instances, you should move inland or to a higher floor of a large building. So you do not wait for an official warning. You move out of the area immediately. Again, don't panic. And again, once the shaking stops, check for your injuries. Something might have hit you and you might have an injury. So you should be aware of that. Go to higher ground, again, if near coastal areas. Look around for hazards such as broken glass and objects in your way. Evacuate only if necessary. Otherwise, stay where you are in case you are a person with disability, because your mobility is in question. So if the authorities advise an evacuation in your area, follow their directions immediately. So you should always secure your safety first. Do not move the injured unless they are in the line of danger. Use SOS to call for an emergency. So ask permission from the injured first, worst case scenario, if they are conscious, to move them from harm, because there might be a tsunami or a storm surge coming. And then a case study again, we were able to investigate inside the Hong Kong Arts Theater, and they deemed that their theater is actually dangerous during disasters. So one of our recommendations is to put a ramp at the stage area. That way, the people at the stage area would not need to jump down the stage, so they could just move safely through the use of the ramp. And this ramp leads to the exit door. These are some of the investigators. Okay, case study again, back with Hong Kong Disneyland. So as you well know, Hong Kong Disneyland packs a lot of people almost every day, except during the pandemic, of course. And they're always wary that something might happen inside their resort. So they use crowd control to make the environment safer for Hong Kong Disneyland. So for instance, if you can see, some places are well lit and some are not. So this way, the people would tend to go to the well-lit places, so that they're actually being led out, especially during closing time. So as you can see, all the other areas are dark except for the central building. So people tend to go there instead of just sluttering around in the dark areas. Okay, so for crowd control number 2, they use simple fences, which are actually not so obvious to the tourists. That way, they limit the movements of the visitors inside the resort. So as you can see, minimal fences at the area, so they should not jump around the fences. It's actually a form of nudging or positive manipulation on the part of the administrators of Hong Kong Disneyland. So crowd control number 3, what happens is they light up the whole area, usually at closing time, and then they slowly dim it. So this goes dimmer and dimmer and until the crowd is actually let out of the whole theme park and onto the fireworks display. As you can see, this is getting dimmer and dimmer. And then you're led into this area, so you experience the fireworks display. But this is actually a practice of crowd control where in case, worst case scenario, there's a terrorist attack or there's a disaster happening, they are actually using components of lighting to lead the crowd to a safe place. So every day they have this fireworks display, and this is what you see at the end of the theme park, and then you're led out. So designing for our future selves, this is a concept from Professor Roger Coleman at the Helen Hamlin Center, Burrell Center of Art, where it is promoted that younger persons should provide built environments that are elder-friendly or PWD-friendly in preparation for when they become older. This is actually for when we become older. This can be a useful way to sensitize people about the importance of preparing the built environment, the things everyone uses, by requiring them to imagine their changing needs when they themselves become less able. Okay, so with that, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I hope I was able to share some ideas to everyone. Thank you very much.